Hello folks, welcome to CarDekho. Now the sub 4 meter rule has been a curveball for most manufacturers in the country. However, our very own desi Mahindra seems to have developed a liking for this odd rule. They have not one but two compact SUVs in their portfolio. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the TUV 300's elder sibling, the Mahindra NuvoSport. Now, most of y'all will call the NuvoSport a slightly rehashed Quanto. We don't blame you, purely because the biggest change here lies under the skin. The NuvoSport rides on the third generation chassis from the new Scorpio. Yes, it does get certain design tweaks as well, like an entirely reworked face. It gets the signature Mahindra grille, a functional hood scoop, a really aggressive bumper with silver skid plate, and this really nice looking LED eyebrow DRL. Over to the side and the rear, the changes remain minimal. For example, there's just a lot of cladding, those new 16-inch wheels, and the smoke tail lamps at the rear. Overall, it does look slightly quirky still, but we think it retains that SUV appeal. Let's check the interiors. Now, you do have to climb inside the NuvoSport just like you would in the old Quanto. Now, the design remains identical, but Mahindra have thrown in a couple of updates here as well. The biggest change, of course, is the 6.2-inch touchscreen infotainment system that's a straight lift from the much more expensive SsangYong Rexton. It sits flush with the center console at an almost upright angle. That makes using this on the move quite a task. Other updates include this nice and chunky steering wheel with mounted controls and the faux leather upholstery. Quality continues to remain a hit or a miss with the NuvoSport, and we think Mahindra could have done better considering this car costs nearly 10 lakhs. There are a couple of ergonomic issues as well. For example, you cannot buckle in with this handrest in place. Secondly, the pedals are slightly offset to the right, which does take quite a bit of time to get used to. The key USP of the NuvoSport continues to remain space. It is a 5+2 seater just like the TUV 300, which means you can carry those extra 2 passengers when you're out on a long trip. The space in the third row is just about average. It's best suited for people who are under 6 feet tall or just best left to kids. The space in the second row, however, is more than adequate for even someone of my size. With the driver's seat set to my position, I have more than adequate legroom and ample amount of headroom as well. But we do have two key issues with the second row. First, with the third row in place, the backrest of the second row is at a near 90-degree angle. At the end of those long journeys, you will have a strained back if you're traveling full house. Second, the NuvoSport does need a rear AC. As you might have noticed, the glass area on the NuvoSport is huge. Couple that with the dark faux leather upholstery, the cabin does tend to heat up a lot when you leave it under the sun. A rear AC system would have definitely helped cool the cabin down quickly. Now, let's take it out for a spin. The NuvoSport is powered by a 1.5-litre 3-cylinder motor that's called the M-Hawk 100. It's called that because it generates 100 bhp of power and 240 Nm of torque. Now, when you drive the NuvoSport around, you quickly realize that it's been tuned for the city and efficiency. It also gets an eco mode, which detunes the engine and gives it an ARAI rated fuel economy of 17.45 kilometers to the litre. However, out in the real world, the max we've achieved is somewhere around 13.5. The good part about the engine is that all of the 240 Nm of torque kicks in at a relatively low 1600 RPM, which means that you can canter about in the city without any fuss. Of course, the NuvoSport does get an optional AMT in the N6 and the N8 variant. The AMT is slightly jerky and you will notice the shifts. Even in manual mode, it takes a considerable amount of time to register and reflect an upshift or a downshift. It isn't too happy being driven really hard or revved. It does just fine when you drive it with a light foot. Talking about the steering, it's nice and light and it does take the sting out of maneuvering the NuvoSport inside the city. That said, we really wish that the turning radius of the NuvoSport could have been a bit tighter. When you have to take a quick U-turn in a crowded city lane, it can be quite a pain. The ride quality, as expected, is slightly choppy and it does tend to throw the occupants around a bit, especially if you go over undulated surfaces. But the softer suspension does iron the potholes out. Although the new chassis from the Scorpio does control the body roll slightly, there is still a considerable amount of body roll through the bends. Well, guess you can't beat physics after all. On the safety front, the NuvoSport gets optional dual airbags with ABS and EBD on the base N4 variant, whereas it is standard on the N6 and the N8. Overall, if you thought that the TUV lacked a bit of power, then the NuvoSport does pose as a good alternative. The NuvoSport is definitely a better package than the Quanto. In fact, it is what the Quanto should have been all along. However, we do wish that Mahindra would have priced the NuvoSport slightly aggressively and possibly undercut the likes of the Brezza and the EcoSport, for example. Nonetheless, if you do need a powerful 7-seater SUV with an optional automatic, the NuvoSport is the one to pick. That's all about the Mahindra NuvoSport. If you've got any questions or comments, do leave them below and we'll be glad to reply. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the CarDekho YouTube channel for more news and reviews.